So if you're in a market where you can buy a house for $100,000, chances are you can't build it for that amount, so you're not in the right market for it.
Welcome back, passionate investing community. Most real estate investors play defense, buying what's already built, fighting bidding wars, and hoping appreciation will do the heavy lifting. But today's guest decided to build her own path, literally. So Natalie Cloutier started with zero capital and a bold idea. So if the right deal doesn't exist, create it. And so she is the mind behind what she calls BRRRR 2.0, which is build, rent, refinance, repeat, a strategy that flips traditional investing on its head. And of course, I could say a whole lot more, but I really like to have my guests introduce themselves. So with that, it's time to introduce our wonderful guest for the day. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you so much for having me on, George. This is an honor.
Well, it's an honor to me too, because I know you've been on some of the very best shows in the world, including Bigger Pockets. And I guess that might be a good place to start. But I did promise I would let you introduce yourself. So my favorite way to start is to ask, suppose you're at a cocktail party and somebody asks, what do you do? How would you answer?
Well, actually, I do get asked that often. And I never really know. I think I still don't know how to answer that because it's always like
Okay.
a two-part question. But I tell people that I build houses and then I rent them out and I keep the houses. And I have a construction company and then I have kind of a rental holding company. And then I'll usually get a puzzled look because people don't really know what that means.
Good, I like that. Well, that's better than Tim Ferriss' answer because I think he always tells people that he's a drug dealer.
Yeah,
That's how he
that's
gets
more
his money.
entertaining for sure.
So anyway, I like your answer better, more to the point. But yeah, actually, let's get back to the bigger pockets. It turns out I just finished for the second time Multifamily Millionaire #1 by Brandon Turner. Of course, he's the one who invented the term BRRRR in the first place, but BRRRR 2.0, okay? Tell us what exactly is that and why does it mean so much today, for example, in the midst of a housing crisis? I mean, not just in the United States, but of course, you're French Canadian, and your country is going through something quite similar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I should probably coin Burr 2.0 since I can't have Brandon keep all the good coins. Should coin that one too. But anyways, so yeah, the reason I love this so much is because like you said, you don't have to wait for deals to get created and kind of, it's really hard to get into competitive markets when there's a good deal that pops up for an investment property. Usually there's a couple bidding wars on it and you're trying to get in, and so it gets frustrating and it's hard to buy a property, especially in Canada. Property prices are really high, so you try to get in where there's still equity left to build onto it, and that can be really hard. So we build it from scratch, meaning that we will kind of create our own deals and we love it. You were a data scientist, so
Yeah.
it's all based on numbers. You got it. And I love that. You can't do a deal just based on your gut because that's a gamble. So you just have to make your numbers work in the beginning to make sure that you can build in a market where your cost of building will be less than the finished appraisal, right? So if you're in a market where you can buy a house for $100,000, chances are you can't build it for that amount, so you're not in the right market for it. So if you're in a market where prices are high enough, then yeah, try to build something from scratch. The way to get started usually is to do like build in some sweat equity. So you do a lot of work yourself and you save some money and then you can reappraise it at the end and sort of like a cash out refi. So on a lot of our deals, most of them anyways, we usually cash out about 30, 40, sometimes $50,000 where we can take that money, buy a piece of land in cash with that money and start over on the next one. So our ROIs are usually infinite on the projects because we didn't
Yeah.
leave any money in the deal, right? So that's the appeal of this strategy. It really works wonders if you do it well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you do it well, I mean, the devil's in the details. And I know we're going to talk about your book where you actually do get into the numbers because for a lot of people, this is kind of exotic. Buying existing is the way things go. But when we get more deep into this, I mean, like so many investors, you really started out with nothing. How did you get to the point where you stand today?
We started actually, okay, let's go back. I'm gonna do like a long story short. when we had just graduated from college, my husband and I met in college. We were studying architectural technology. So that's kind of when you're like the tech to the architect, right? So, and we wanted to rent. And obviously, we sat down with someone. They said that there's more advantages to owning something, but we couldn't really afford anything. We were right out of college, had entry level salaries, we had no savings, but we also didn't have any debt. But anyways, we were able to secure a basement unit condo. So that was all great. We were homeowners, but it came with a catch. First of all, it's a basement unit, so it's not really, very fun to live in. My husband wanted a
Yeah.
garage and a yard, and it came with a higher interest rate because we were first-time buyers without any down payment. So we had to go through like I think it's like the equivalent of an FHA loan for you guys,
Yes,
if I'm
yes.
not
Okay. First
mistaken.
time home buyer. Yeah.
Yeah, so in Canada, it's a CMHC loan. And so
Right.
we did that. It's a higher interest loan. And plus, with the condo fees adding up every month, it just ended up being like the property we didn't want to be in. We kind of felt stuck.
Yeah.
And so we were talking to my parents, like, we can't afford a house, but we're stuck with this mortgage, with this place. And my parents, like, well, you know what? They sat us down, and it was like I was getting this family secret where my mom's like, you can build your own house if you want, if you're willing to put in the work, and you can replace your down payment with sweat equity. So you go in there, you do a lot of work yourself, and you
Love
save the
it.
down payment. So you go in with $0. And it sounded great. We're like, let's do this. Obviously, it's still nerve-wracking. You're building a house from scratch. It's a lot to take in. But we did it. We built our house. And I remember actually the first time the shovel was coming onto the ground to start digging, my husband threw up in the bushes. He was so nervous.
Yeah.
But we did it. We built it. And my parents had told us, plan for a basement apartment too when you're designing the house. That way,
Okay.
because like I said, we had entry level salaries. We had really crappy salaries. So it was still nerve wracking, even though you're going in to buy a house with zero down payment, you still have this mortgage to support every month. And so my parents said, if you plan for a basement apartment, you'll have that income and it'll help you live for almost free, which turned out to be house hacking that Brandon Turner coined a little later. So that's what we did. And we still live in the same house today. If people are looking on YouTube, this is the house right here behind me. I have my
Yeah.
mother-in-law painted a picture of it. And so we have a basement apartment. Right now it's living empty, but my parents might eventually move into it. But we had it for 10 years. We had a tenant. And so we always lived for free in our house. We just paid for our groceries and whatever else, our living expenses. And it was great. And then we built a business on top of that, got a HELOC on the house, and we kept going.
I love the story about throwing in the bushes. My sister and I, we started a construction company, and I remember when we finally got the land clearing equipment out there and started just knocking down trees. I mean, I swear that the first video that we posted, they were just, pulling up bushes, but it was so exciting. We had to post it. It's like, yes,
Yeah,
we are
yeah,
making
it
ground
is
here.
very exciting, yet also very nerve-wracking for a couple of 19-year-olds.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yes, and you did start out very, very young. I love the way you said in other views, young and in love, and
Yeah.
no money, and but beautiful story, beautiful human story, and also a beautiful investing story. So I love it. Yeah. So I kind of started out as an accidental landlord. Dad, I can't
Hmm.
buy a new house. I know houses are cheap now, but he said, yeah, you can do it. You're going to rent this out, and you will keep it. You will have two mortgages.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we did, and it worked out. Worked out great.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so build to rent. This is great. I think that for some of our listeners, it may still be a little bit of a conundrum building, and yet you're still a landlord. It's amazing to me because, and I think you do talk about this in your book, you do have multiple exit strategies. Now, for you, your preferred strategy is to hold on and you continue to be the landlord, you cash out, and then then well, anyway, I'll let you take it from there. But tell us some of the advantages of BTR.
So, like I said, if you're able to build well where you don't have to leave any money in the deal, you can actually pull out money. That's the biggest
Yeah.
advantage, right? You can take money out of the deal, put it into the next one, and it becomes an infinite cycle. So that's the first advantage. There's a bunch of advantage. I think there's actually like one of the first chapters of my book, I just talk about the advantages, but
Yeah.
the top five maybe, so or even top three to keep it short. The next thing that I love is that you don't have any inherited tenants because when you buy an
Yeah.
existing commercial property or even just an
Right.
existing duplex, you're inheriting the tenant. So I don't know about, tenant laws in every state or every province is different. Here in Ontario, tenant laws are very, very strict. If you
Right.
buy a property, you got to keep the existing tenants. Even if you want to do a major renovation, you're still supposed to give them like the first right of refusal at the existing rate they were paying. So it makes no sense almost to buy something and
I
renovate
know.
it. Yeah, you have to really strike a deal where you can officially like really let them out and then you can renovate and re-rent to a normal
Yeah.
price. So for us, it makes sense because I don't have to deal with other tenants that maybe were a problem and that's why the landlord was selling. I'm starting from scratch. I can get my own tenants and vet them myself and train them myself too as to how I want to work through with my procedures as a landlord. So that's one of my favorite advantages. And the other one is just you're not dealing with an old property where you don't know when you have a maintenance call, you got to troubleshoot, you don't know what's going on. And then not just that, but you often get maintenance calls because it's an old place and you got to deal with it.
Right.
And then maybe sometimes too, if the places are really old, you deal with Class C tenants. And so you have more problems with a build to rent. It's brand new. You get Class A tenants, you get higher rents, and you get less maintenance calls. I always say though, the first year or maybe even just the first 6 months, you will get maintenance calls because it's a brand new place where it's never been lived in. So it's like a restaurant that's still being tested. You're still testing the waters literally and the mechanical system. So you do get some calls in the first 6 months to a year. And then after that, it's pretty much smooth sailing until, I mean, I have one property that's at year 10 now. Or even year 9, and I just had to change the expansion tank on the hot water tank, but that's about it. I mean, I haven't had any other issues with the place. So I think we're still smooth sailing on that one for a while.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. And to be clear, you're building apartment buildings, correct?
So we're small multifamily. We have
Small.
never built anything over a sixplex so far. So we
Okay.
started with single family homes and then sold them because there was no cash flow to duplexes,
Right.
triplexes, fourplexes, and we've
I
just
love
done
it.
two
Yeah.
sixplexes. We have a lot where we can add on 9 units or maybe even a 12 unit, and it's something we're looking into. But honestly, it's not something I'm looking forward to because it's a whole different ball game. The financing isn't the same. The procedures just to get your permit, the development charges with the city, it's a whole headache that I'm not even sure I want to do. I think I'd rather divide the lot and build like a few sixplexes and keep it small multifamily just because, I think in terms of risk aversion too, there's less risk staying in a smaller multifamily and the numbers work beautifully. So I don't know. We're still looking into that, but I'm not even sure I want to, venture out into bigger multiplexes.
All right, great. Well, we have to come back to your book, and I do definitely want to talk about permitting, but risk aversion. See, that's one of the things I like about your story. I believe, this year that you didn't take on any new building projects, whereas, let me contrast with how I see other investors doing things like, well, I could afford, potentially to add, one project, buy one apartment this year. Why don't I buy three? And they're just, scaling maybe in an unsustainable way. But talk to me about that risk aversion and the sustainable growth.
Yeah, you know what though? There is definitely a way to make building to rent less sustainable. If you go in and try to get a huge mortgage at the end of your build just because you want to pull out as much cash as possible, then you over leverage, then that's where, the problems happen and you become there's more risks involved. Also, if you build blindly, like if you go in just thinking, "Oh, I'm going to buy this land, I'm going to build," but you didn't do your research before, you didn't do your due diligence, again, there can be a lot of risk involved in that. So you have to
Can we
be
stop you right there? Because I want to
for
talk about
sure.
buying land without losing your shirt. Obviously, that's the first step. You've got to buy the land, you've got to entitle it, you've got to, what are some things you can do to sort of de-risk that during your due diligence or writing up your contract? How do you make sure that your principal is safe when you put your money into to land?
Yeah, so I would tell people do a conditional offer on the when you're doing a conditional offer to purchase, make sure that you have there's always I think there's 5 conditions. So there's one where you make sure that you can get the permit for what you want to build. So you take the time, a 10 business day condition where you have the time to sit with the city or at least send an email to the city and you get a written instructions back from them saying that yes, you can build XYZ of whatever you want to build. These are the conditions attached to it, so you're familiar with and you know what needs to be done. And in my book, I have a checklist that I provide with the book where you can ask all these questions and make sure that you have your answers up front. So that's like the first thing. And if you can't get your answers within 10 days, then ask an extension rather on your offer because you want to make sure that that's where most of your surprises are going to come up, right? That's where the
Yeah.
risks come up. If you didn't ask the city, if you didn't know that you needed all of these studies or these reports or whatever, and your zoning's not even right for what you want to build, you have to change the zoning and then it doesn't get accepted, and then you're stuck with this land where what are you going to do? You got to resell it, and maybe if at a profit if you're lucky. So knowing everything and getting everything in writing by the city is step number one. And then you have to make sure that your soil is a good condition to build too, right? So if you have really crappy soil where you have to, I don't know, bring in a bunch of like rocks to do solid foundation, and you have to really build up the foundation, just basically soil is where your next risk would come in, to make sure that if you have bad soil and you have to put in a $50,000 foundation on top of what you were already supposed to pay, then that's going to
Right.
put you behind, right? So
Right. So
you
that
need to make
soil survey, that's expensive too. And so that's another one of your contingencies. Then can you cancel the contract if the soil survey comes back and says, okay, so that's one of the five. So I want to say intelligence learn from their mistakes, but the wise learn from the mistakes of others. So I would say,
Yep.
definitely go and buy Natalie's book, read those checklists, and, don't end up in a contract where you find out like, oh my goodness, my EMD has gone hard. And, now I'm in a situation where I either have to buy this or walk away from the EMD, and I don't know if I can get my money back. So first step is, make sure you're writing the contract right. And I love that you've got all those contingencies in there. But the other thing you mentioned is sitting down with the city, because I see people do this all the time. Usually it's with redevelopment. I feel like ground up developers are a little smarter, and they're like, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And it's like, well, you can't build, if you can't build by right, and I mean, even if you are building by right, probably still a good idea to get on the city's good side. But,
Yeah.
they have this idea that they're going to apply for variances, and they haven't sat down with the city to see if there's anything approaching a meeting of the minds.
Yeah, no, exactly. You really got to sit down and make sure, because if, like I said, we've been through it. Plus, before I started investing, I was a house designer. I worked for a custom house designing company, and I worked with a lot of developers in the big city that were doing, duplexes, semi-detaches, and whatever. And
Mhm.
so I would go through the whole phase with them of the engineering and all that up until permit stage. So I had that experience. I did learn also through other people's mistakes. Usually here we just need a soil test, which is a couple $100. So it's not a big
Yeah.
deal. You do it, you pay for it. Worst case, you're out a couple $100 if the soil test comes back negative. On bigger, larger scale commercial properties, sometimes like for like a sixplex or more, then you might need like environmental studies, and then that becomes a little bit more complicated. Again, you can usually work a deal with the vendor saying that you want to do at least phase one of that environmental study
Right.
before being firm on the offer. So there's a few ways to
Yeah.
go about it. It depends on like your region too, and what the requirements are in your area, or if it's a commercial property versus just a single family home, right?
Mhm. Yeah, beautiful. So awesome. So I don't know if you want to give away any of the other contingencies they put in there. I think you listed at least three or more, but yeah, super, super amazing, because I mean that is huge. I think that's the first real stumbling block for people. They got to buy the land and they don't even fully know if they can build what they want. Well, now, quick question for you. Do you like to build by right, or you usually need to apply for variances to make your building profitable?
We've done a mix of all kinds. I prefer to build by right if possible,
Mhm.
but we have done a couple minor variances. Mostly, usually it's the parking requirements that becomes an issue, because what we'll do is a lot of our
Mm.
projects are infill projects where you go
Yeah.
into an urban area, you'll take an existing property, demolish it, and rebuild. So you got to rebuild within, let's say, a smaller zoning or just a denser area. So if you went from a single family home that you demolished and now you're building a fourplex, now all of a sudden we try to do 2 parking spaces per unit. So now all of a sudden I need 8 parking spaces whereas before there was only maybe 2 parking spaces. So sometimes we do need to do minor variance for parkings or even just building width, but we try to do it within just because it makes the process faster. Plus, two, it helps with your risks, right? You want to make sure that when you're buying the property that the city will accept the way that you want to build. And if you have to do a minor variance, you're not always guaranteed that it's going to pass. So the other thing too that came into recent light in 2023 in Ontario, and I think that's happening like across the board, they're trying to incentivize affordable housing. Sorry, I was looking for the term.
Right, right.
So a lot of communities are trying, or municipalities are trying to incentivize that and offer denser housing. So by doing that, they're trying to loosen up the strings on certain zonings. So in 2023 here, they added a law where if you already had the right to add a secondary dwelling unit onto your property, now you have the right to add a second secondary unit. So if before you were only allowed to do a duplex, you can now do a triplex. And
Nice.
and if for the people looking on YouTube, if they can see this one here, this used to be a
Mhm.
duplex. We took so there was let me do it like this. There was a roof
Yep.
before. It was just these two units, the basement unit and the main floor. We ripped off the unit, built the third floor on top, and we put the roof right back on top. So we
Wow.
had set the roof on the lawn, and I have a video of that on my Instagram. It's really really cool of
Oh,
the
oh, you were able to preserve it. That's awesome.
yes,
So
we
I was going to say
preserved the
that
roof.
usually not economical to tear the roof off and build
No,
another floor.
exactly. So we just cut the strings at the cords and we craned the roof onto the front lawn, built the roof while
Yeah.
we had a week of like full sun in May. We built the third unit and then we craned the roof back on top. It was really, really cool. And so that was a really profitable project. But yeah, so we turned it and this because in Canada, I don't know if you guys know this, our mortgage rates renew every 3 to 5 years, depending on
Ah, so
how
it's totally
many.
different. Yeah. So yeah, like
Exactly.
please remind us in the United States how lucky we are with our mortgages.
Yeah, you guys can lock in like a 30-year fixed rate, and that blows my freaking mind. How?
Crazy. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, that is awesome. So, I mean, awesome when the rates are low, super crappy when the rates are high. I get that. So here, I guess it has its good and bad because, yeah, when we built this one, we had a bit of well, it was about a 4% rate, which wasn't great for back then. It was like we had access to lower rates and we were locked in for 5 years. But then we knew that once it was up for renewal at the end of 2023, that we would have paid like 6% because 2023 the rates were really high.
Oh, yeah.
So we would have went, and this one was barely cash flowing, but it was in a really great area. So we knew that if we were cash flowing maybe $300 and we jumped the rate from a 4% to a 6%, we're going to lose all the cash flow. But
Mhm.
we still had appreciation and it was still in a great location. We didn't want to sell it. So when they came out with that new law, I remember my husband was building another unit across the street from it, and he just went outside, looked at the property, and was like, I wonder if we can remove the roof off of this thing and convert it and add an extra unit. So it turned
Yeah.
out great, and so now we cash flow $1,000 a month just
Yeah.
by adding that extra unit. So yeah,
I love it. Love it. And then, I love your story about taking off the roof because I mean, I started out in Orlando and the idea of having a week sun with no rain is, at
yeah.
least not during the summer. I see it seems like the rainstorm tears through at 2 p.m. every day. So yeah, doing any roof work out there is crazy. Yeah, so many places I could go through this next, but yeah, you're talking about the mortgages. That's huge because it also influences your prices. But in Canada, I mean, your prices are just through the roof. Like we think that our prices are crazy, but now maybe we'll come back to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. So let's go through some statistics. We got the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation has some statistics, and also you have something called WOMA. So it sounds like a convenience store around here for many people, but we're talking about the personal finance encyclopedia for Canadians. So they tell us that in British Columbia, the average home price is 964,000 Canadian dollars, even with a very generous exchange. I checked it today of 1.39. That's $694,000 US. That's huge. And that's the average home price in the US, $534,000. So even making an apples to apples comparison, I mean, your home prices in Canada are just like they're off the charts.
Yeah, and I actually talk about that in my book. I compare both markets because my audience is really 50-50 between US and Canadian. So by the way,
Mhm.
if you're American, you're listening to this and you're thinking I'm Canadian, my book won't be good for you. It is. The book is very generally based, and in the beginning of the book, I compare both markets. And yes, I did pull up a statistic. I think it's not the same numbers as you, but it was from an earlier year. But yeah, I
Mhm.
think from what I remember, the median home prices in general in Canada, like not just because BC is a very expensive province.
Very.
So if you're looking just across the board, I think we were at 750, and then you guys were at
Yeah.
about 450. So still a
Yeah.
$300,000 range, even with the conversion and stuff. But and it was based on the same amount of income. Like the general average income was about 60,000, I think, or I don't remember. Anyways,
Right, right.
but it was based on the like same comparing apples to apples, like you said. So yes, it is very expensive, which is why that building almost makes more sense. Except nowadays they're changing. There's development charges are coming up a lot higher than they used to be. Land prices have gone up as well since COVID. So, I mean, your build prices are still pretty high, especially if you're looking to do a turnkey build. Like a lot of people, a lot of investors can't do their own build like we do. So they need to hire like a general contractor. And so that adds up. And sometimes it doesn't always make sense, but it can still make sense if you don't build in the big cities. If you go a little outside, we got to find like those cities outside the big cities, if you know what I mean. Got to
Right. Yeah.
find
For build
like
to rent, that's usually the strategy, right? You're building outside of the major metro, just on the sort of outskirts, just where land starts to get cheap is where it usually seems to make sense.
yeah, and where rents are still high, where there's still enough work to go around for people, they still have good jobs and so they can still afford general high rents.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And you're going to draw those people in, the people that are working in the city.
Yeah.
Okay, that's beautiful. And I have to thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with your audience. You're doing amazing things in the world, and I hope that you get 1 million downloads out of this. But now I have to make sure that our audience can get in touch with you. So, email, website, carrier pigeon, or smoke signals. What is the best way to reach out to Natalie Cloutier?
I am on Instagram at the New Build Couple. You can also go on my website, www.thenewbuildcouple.com, and you can go, send me an email from there. But I'm very active on Instagram. I answer all my messages there. So anybody wants to follow me, get it done.
All right, love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.